Dance to the daddy, sing to the mommy, dance to the daddy, to the mommy sing. Thou shalt have a fishy and a little ishy, thou shalt have a fishy when the boat comes in.
Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to tie two flies for you. The first is a beadhead nymph. It's going to tie it onto size 10, so it's going to be pretty much a go-to fly for most waters. It's a very simple fly, but it is a very useful fly. In fact, probably every fly box in the world where you catch a trout or grayling, these would be prolific. So we're putting a gold bead head on our fly and locking it in our vise. The bead is going to give us a bit of weight to get down deep quickly, so we can bounce it across the bottom where the fish will be feeding. I'm going to use a size 6 weight thread. It's an intermediate, so we can put a little bit of tension on it. Now, to tie our thread in, we just wrap around the top of the hook, and then we pick up our tag and we wind over it until we form a firm base for which to apply our materials. So once we've got a few wraps around it, we cut this daggy bit off. Now we'll take our thread to a point that's directly above the barb of our hook. So if we hang it down, that forms a line. To add a tail, we're going to use some fibres off a red cock feather. Normally you'd put 3 fibres in for a tail, but it's easy to put a few extra in and take them out rather than try it out of mean later. So we'll put this on the top of our fly and bring the thread up between our fingers and down again until we form a tail sitting nicely on top of our hook. We can now remove the excess feathers, and that's the way you'll tie in a tail on 95 flies out of 100. Because it's going to be a segmented body, we're going to add a bit of gold tinsel. To do that, we'll turn our fly upside down and tie the tinsel in underneath the hook shank. And if you notice, my thread is always going in the one direction. It's away from me. So when we come to tying in our tinsel, it can go the opposite direction to our thread, thus sitting up proud on top of the materials we've added. So we'll take this back to our point of start. This is artificial dubbing because I won't use genuine seal's fur. I think the seal needs it more than I do. So we're going to make a brown fly today, so we'll take a couple of different browns and we're going to use a little bit often if necessary. So we'll just mix them together, just like pulling and mixing until we get a mixture. Now between our finger and our thumb, just roll them out. And the same now, we'll do exactly the same technique but with our thread. We'll roll that onto our thread and roll it up to the hook. Then again, winding away from me, I'll form a body that's in the shape of an ice cream cone. So it's going to be thin down the end and it's going to thicken up as we get towards the head. And we can add more dubbing if we want to. We just want it to be a little bit scruffy. We want all the fibres of the dubbing to stick out and just make it look really buggy and interesting. So we'll add just a bit more to that. So 95% of the trout's diet is taken below the water, so we're creating a fly now that's going to sit down where the trout are feeding. So we can use this fly when there's no fish taking off the top, but we know they're down there, so we're now creating this nice cone effect. So as you can see, it tapers up toward the head. So now just a couple of turns there. Now what I was saying about winding in the opposite direction, this gold forming a segmented body is sitting up on top of the windings, not also fitting down into what we've already tied. So we've now got a segmented body, and we'll tie that in just by going over it, tied in tight behind the bead. And then we'll just put a few wraps. It doesn't matter how much silk we use on one of these flies because we want it to sink, so the more elements we put on to make it sink, the better. Now I'll just cut that tag of tinsel off, and we'll tie the fly. If we do that with a simple half hitch, so just roll the thread round your finger, slide it over the bead and pull it tight. Again, over the bead, pull it tight. We'll do that 3 times. And there we have our finished product. A beadhead nymph.
Thou shalt have a fishy on a little ishy. Thou shalt have a fishy when the boat comes in.
And the second fly we're going to tie today is a red tag. So again, we're using the same size 10 hook in the vise. We're going to use a lighter thread this time. This is an 8-weight thread because it being a dry fly we want it to float, and so the less material on it the better. So we'll tie it in as per the nymph, just across the top of the hook and winding back towards our start point above the barb. We'll take off this excess thread and go back. And it hangs nicely. So you can go to the parkland where the rosellas are fed, and you'll find these all over the place. So we just want the red bit on the end, so we'll tie that in the same way we did the tail. We'll hold at the top of the hook, loop between the fingers, down and pull tight, and do that 3 or 4 times and cut this rubbish off. And we just make sure that's in nice and tight, put a few extra threads around it and take it back to our point. Now we're going to use the hurl, it's called, off the peacock feather. So we want to tie in 4. We're going to use 4, but we'll tie in 5 because these are renowned for breaking. So these all look about right, so we'll cut 1, 2, 3, 5. We'll line them up so they're all roughly the same starting point. Which is that one. And facing backwards we tie them in to form a bit of a rope. So again, hold it, loop it over the top, come around, and then we can start to wind forward. We're going to want to create a bit of a body here, so we take off the end we don't need. Now we're careful here not to cut our thread, so rather than use the scissors, the pincer movement, we put our scissors in and just push through, and that way we cannot cut our thread, which is not good. Now we're going to wind through to about 1/3 of the way from the eye of the hook, which is about there. Now we'll leave one of these hurls out and we'll wind these together to form a nice plump body. We're getting close to our point, so we'll just tie that in. So we'll come around and tie that end in, and again just put a few turns on it to secure it, and the same thing, we'll cut these off without cutting our thread. We might like a bit more bulk in the body, so we'll use our extra one and we'll bring it forward to try and create a big fat clump noise. When we're tying, try and remember not to have used soap on your hands beforehand. Whatever you've got on your hands will transfer to the materials on your fly. A dog's ability to smell is 1,000 times more than ours. A fish's ability to smell is 1,000 times more than a dog. So that means a fish has ability to smell 1,000,000 times more than us. So they're very sensitive to artificial smells like soap and deodorant. So when you're tying, just remember that. Now we're going to put a hackle on here, which is going to create the legs and the stuff that's going to sink down under the meniscus of the water. So we want a feather that when we roll it around is going to be roughly the distance between the point of the hook and the rest of the hook. That's called the gape. So we'll find a feather here, and when we bend it, we find that fibres are pretty close. So we're going to pull back the fibres so we can tie it in alongside the hook. So again, just a few turns to tie it in, and maybe a couple underneath it, and then another one over the top, and there we've got that secure. We can cut the bit off we're not going to use, and if we wanted to, we could use that for tail fibres for another nymph. Now, if we put the end of this feather in a pair of hackle pliers and then rotate, let's first of all put a half hitch in, stop that undoing. Now we can rotate the hook in the vise, and this will create a beautiful hackle, very, very even hackle. And this is going to allow our fly to float. Sometimes it comes out of your pliers, it's not the end of the world. So we'll try again. Now we're building up. This is the legs of the beetle. This is the stuff that you don't really see until it's under the water. Then bring that forward, bring your tying thread over it, catch it in. Do this 3 or 4 times. And then we can cut off the excess feather. Again, we'll push through it rather than use the jaws so we don't destroy our. Pull those fibres back as far as we can, and then we'll find our whip finish tool. It's almost like you can use a biro end, it's just got a hole in there, so we'll wrap that around our thread 2 or 3 times, stick the hole over the eye of our hook and slide it down, and it ties in. We'll do that maybe 3 times. And it forms a knot that can't come undone and leave you with nothing but muck on the top of the water. And there it is. That's your red tag. This fly is much of a favourite all over the world, and it's an absolute beautiful fly. Thank you for joining me this afternoon, and I hope you've got something out of this, and I hope that when you go fishing with your flies you've made, you'll enjoy the process much, much more. Thank you.